So I heard, and this is probably awkward, but I guess not, because I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. I've heard that you're a
We
trans
can talk about
widow.
it.
Can you talk
Yeah.
about that? Like, yeah.
Right. So why would anyone take up learning about all this as a hobby, right? I mean, this is really very I don't know. For some people, this might be a boring subject. For some people, they don't care.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really a subject that's depressing. So why would I want to look into this? So
Right.
the reason I started looking into this is because I'm a trans widow. A trans widow is a woman whose husband left to present as female for the rest of their life. And so I was married. I had 3 kids with my first husband, and he decided after 15 years that he wanted to live his life as a woman. This was really hard for me to understand at the time. It
Mhm.
did not fit what I witnessed in my marriage. And
Hmm.
obviously, there was a great deal of deception, but I still do not believe that he's was a man uh, that had a inner female, or that he was a woman trapped in a man's body. So when I was married to him, we went to a therapist to address a cross-dressing issue that came up in our
Huh.
marriage
Mhm.
early on, right after the birth of our first child.
Mhm.
And she told me I was closed-minded because I wasn't on board with the cross-dressing, and that I couldn't see a way to negotiate this issue with my husband, that I wasn't cool with him joining some group to cross-dress with other men, and like have weekends of cross-dressing or nights out cross-dressing together, or if he had a private post office box where he would get catalogs and invitations to these events, I would never even have to know about it. Right, because I would totally not notice the makeup, residuals whenever he comes home, from
Yeah.
something like that. I would totally
Yeah.
not notice that he had been wearing nails. I mean, usually when he did cross dress, I did notice something after the fact, which is how I found out. I only, I think, twice in the whole marriage walked in on something,
Mm.
and it wasn't the full range of
Yeah.
cross dressing until the end of our marriage, when he already told me, it's over and he's leaving. So, um,
All because you
but
wouldn't accept his cross dressing,
right,
basically?
because
Or
there was problems in our marriage, mainly due to that he cross-dressed, and
Mhm.
the therapist early on in the marriage, I want to say like in the 90s, 1998, went to a
Hmm.
therapist in Houston. She's still a therapist in Houston, Denise O'Darity. She now writes a book, or has published a book, on how to transition children.
Oh
So
God.
she's just like a
Wow.
super
How
ethical
interesting.
person. Yeah, she told me that I was closed-minded, and that I must be a lesbian because I fell in love with a man who wanted to be a woman, or that
This was
at
in
the
the
time,
90s?
this was in the 90s. So
Oh my
no, she didn't
word.
say I fell in love with a man that wanted to be a woman. She said I fell in love with a man who had this inner woman to him. So, because of that, I
Hmm.
therefore must be a lesbian. I mean, I think I know what my preference is. And in fact, I'm a Christian. So she was going against my own worldview,
Mhm.
which typically counselors wouldn't do, because that causes a lot of stress.
Yeah.
So I no longer wanted to see her as a couple or individually. And I told my husband, after she
Who
said,
picked
and
that therapist? I'm curious.
he did. He had apparently
Oh, you
seen
don't
her.
say. Okay.
He had seen her without
Exactly.
me. I did not know.
What? Oh, and then you
Yeah.
guys went to get. Wow, what a sham. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't know that he had seen her. And so when we were talking that day, she said to me, he will not know if he's male or female for 3 months. So that's when I knew that he had seen her, because this was the first time I heard anything like this. And I said, if
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't know that, then I have my answer. I will be getting a divorce, because he never said to me that, sorry,
That's
I
okay.
don't know how to, my
No
one of my
worries.
phones has decided to just talk. But if he wanted to be a woman, I had never heard of that before, and
Right.
then it wasn't going to work out. And he said she was putting words in his mouth. So obviously, I wasn't there for their initial consultation. I don't know if he told her he wanted to be a woman at their initial consultation. But I
Like
do
lying by
know.
omission. He's keeping you in the dark. That's not
Right,
a
but they
relationship.
had
Yeah.
one he did, he was honest about several things. It's hard to
Mhm.
say which ones were true, which things were not true,
Yeah.
over all the years, but, he had told me he'd seen her one time prior. So in one visit, he was told, he's transgender, I guess, and that he might wanna be a woman in 3 months. I mean, that seems like a really short time
Oh yeah.
considering that you're,
It's crazy short.
that the person, had lived at that time, 20 something years. Let me see. We were well, he was almost 30, I guess.
Mhm.
So that he had lived that many years as a man and had a baby and a wife, and after in 3 months you will know. So 3 months of cross dressing and you will know. Well, I guess he didn't know because we stayed married for 11 years beyond that and
Wow.
had well, I had 3 more pregnancies and gave
Mhm.
birth to 2 more children.
Mhm.
One of those pregnancies, I had a miscarriage, and had cancer as a result
Mhm.
of a like really crazy fertilization issue.
Yeah.
I had a so the I always wondered, did the hormones he started taking, she wrote a prescription or a letter so he could go get a prescription for hormones, and he
Mhm.
started taking female hormones while we were married. He took them for 11 years behind my back.
Oh my.
So, yeah, that seemed unethical to me that a doctor would write that letter, that an endocrinologist would fill the prescription without the spouse even knowing, because this does affect things in the marriage. So, when a
Yeah.
man's on the hormones, then their sex drive is changed, their
Mhm.
their sperm count is affected,
Yeah.
the sperm uh, quality is
Yeah.
affected.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that caused me my miscarriage and subsequent cancer. I mean, I can't prove that
Right.
obviously, but if it
Horrifying.
affects the quality of the sperm, it's very probable that that could have been the reason for the miscarriage and subsequent cancer related to that miscarriage.
Wow.
I then had
Insane.
a baby that had birth defects for which she had to have surgery for. I
Oh my
felt
god.
that could have possibly been. I'll never
Easily.
know, but we would
Yeah.
know for sure if he wasn't on it.
Mhm.
If he wasn't on it, we'd know for sure that it had
Wow.
nothing to do with that action taken, by him and the medical professionals and the mental health professional. But it's completely unethical anyway, because
Yeah.
my husband developed a little tiny breast buds, little torpedo boobs, and I didn't know what caused that. I was thinking,
Wow.
wow, how unlucky for you, and very unattractive, by the way.
Yep.
And I had to overcome this to achieve
Wow.
intimacy in our marriage, which was extremely rare, but still
Yeah.
something that happens in marriage. And I felt sorry for him. I thought it was
Mhm.
from some OCD medication he was taking to resolve the urge to cross dress. And
Oh
I was
wow.
told by him the cross dressing was because he was stressed and I stressed him out, or he
What? It's
felt,
like gaslighting you, blaming it on you? Oh my
yeah,
god in
it was
heaven.
my fault. In fact,
Of course.
the whole sex change I've been told is my fault now. My kids were told the sex change was my fault. He never would have done it if I hadn't divorced him.
So does he regret it now or something? Or are you just saying that to piss you off or in spite
I
of?
One of the easiest and free things you can do to help out my podcast is to leave a Apple Podcast review for this podcast. It is free, pretty effortless. It takes, I don't know, less than a minute out of your day. If you don't want to do that, you can support my podcast by heading to paypal.me/LP Foster Kittens, or become a monthly subscriber to my Subscribe Star, which is subscribestar.com/distorted lens. As always, thank you so much for listening and following me on ODYSEE or YouTube, subscribing, hitting the bell, because I've been told that hitting the bell helps out a lot with getting notified that I'm even posting new content. So God bless y'all, and let's keep trucking on, y'all.
think he's deflecting blame,
Yeah.
rather than, and there has been some expression of regret, but at the same time, he'll say something like, "But it's done now, and there's some benefits to it professionally. He thinks it's professionally helped him. Never mind the fact he got all that education and work experience for 40 years living as a man, and
Well, he
with all
gets all
the
the benefits of identifying into the rainbow, or I don't use the rainbow because that's the Bible. Alphabet soup. You know, you're
right. He gets
label
the
yourself trans.
benefits,
Yeah,
the
no
coverage,
matter where
even
you work.
though, yeah, he gets the coverage of that. He also gets like, oh, it's a woman in this male dominated field, when really you had a wife at home taking care of your kids while you got your master's degree and while you developed your career. So
So twisted.
most women who have children, the reality is we got to sacrifice somewhere. And a lot of us, we don't achieve hit the same levels professionally, even when we're very educated, as men do when they have women to take care of the children. And that's, to me, that's not an inequity. It's just a fact of life. I've accepted
Yeah.
the blessings that come with being a woman. If I wanted to, not have children, I guess that could have been an option, or could have put them in daycare. I chose to be home with my kids. So
You made it up.
but we all have to make these choices. The reality is that men don't have typically the same issue when they have a woman at home who's taking care of the domestic responsibilities, shuttling the kids to doctor appointments, into school, etc., so that they can work the late nights and go back to school and advance professionally. So that's a quite a bit more challenging for women. And so he's had all those advantages, and then transitions and thinks, oh, it's the transition that made the difference, when he is getting the advances that sometimes are given to women, the consideration that's given to women when we're trying to move women up the ladder, because they're women who've worked hard to get to that level, and they want to have more female representation. So he's being put in those places for female representation, and he's a man. Got there just like any other man did. It didn't get there the same way a woman did, with
Total
all the
mockery.
extra
It's a
stuff
joke.
that we have on us, because that's just how it is. And he's a golfer, and he golfs in lady tournaments and wins, so and I checked, and the golf association, that
they're fully into this. In San
they're
Francisco,
into it.
their Pride Month thing or whatever, they had on the side like this whole golf oriented event that was fully Pride, and the images was like transsexuals and whatnot. I was like, holy shit. The Golf Association is fully into this and fully supportive, which kind of makes me think that a lot of the golfers are closeted transvestite. I mean, why else? I mean, I don't know.
Well, the
Maybe
reality is, I mean, golf, if you look back at the past, and I'm not a feminist, but I have to agree with feminists on some of these points that they make. Oh my God, I wish people would stop calling my landline. So the reality is, I have to agree with the feminists on this point, that there's the misogyny that formerly was well known in the golf industry, that women were only allowed to golf on certain days, and women could not be,
if they're even allowed into that country club.
If they're allowed in the country club. They weren't allowed in the country club. So I think we're back to square one. The golf associations now just let men identify into the ladies' sport, into the ladies' competitions, and play from the ladies' tees. And now, so where are the women? Where does that put the women? They can't win in their own sport, just like with the recent
now,
swimming, the swimming competitions
Cycling,
with the Penn State swimmer. So, I mean, really, this is men in charge. I mean, who's making these decisions, really? When it comes to the legislation, when it comes to who's running the sports organizations, are women making these decisions that are displacing women? No.
Nope.
It's
men supporting men.
It's men, and all we hear are, where are the women and where are the feminists? Like, if you're paying attention for the last few years, all I've seen are mostly feminists who mostly follows my page. You would think, if you look at my following on Twitter, that I'm some kind of feminist or lesbian, because that's a lot of them that are following me. And I'm not. I'm a pro-family activist. But on this thing, we agree that
Radical feminists, not liberal,
Yeah.
by the way. Not radical liberal feminists. I've heard that one as well.
Well, I mean,
But-
there's so many categories of feminists now. I
Yeah.
would say that I'm probably would fit into the first wave. You know, yes, women need to be able to vote. Okay, now
yeah, true.
if I really thought that women not voting would just turn our country around, I would tear up my voter registration card. I would never vote again. But I don't think that it's going to change things, because just look who's in charge and who
Yeah.
ushered it in. So the argument that, you know, women are the ones who have complicated things and we've ushered in all of the sexual revolution ourselves, or we're responsible. We're not the ones responsible. Yes, there's been some female advocacy for things that are, you know, unholy, but who held the reins of power? It was men, and they
Yep.
saw a benefit for themselves in the sexual revolution. They saw a benefit in, you know, all this, you know, this stuff with the letting the men compete as women, and letting men identify as women. Well, did we not think about the consequences of that for female spaces? We have now males in juvenile detention, that with females being housed with females in Texas. We now have in our prisons males housed with females, in shelters males housed with females. Don't victims of domestic violence deserve protection from men? They do. They need to talk about a safe space. I guess women don't get to have one, not even in the restroom.
Nope.
We couldn't even pass that in Texas because that was too bigoted. It was just too bigoted to protect
horrifying.
women and girls. And not that boys in bathrooms shouldn't be protected. They should. Everyone deserves privacy.
But no one ever talks. It's not even about. I mean, I know it's okay to say that, but it's so obvious that the glaring person that needs protection is the women. Like, it's the women. We're not really highly obviously concerned about women identifying as a man and going into men's spaces. Like, when have you ever heard that being an issue or whatever in any capacity? It's always about women, which says a lot.
Men are notoriously more likely to be violent offenders.
Yep.
The men. Did I say women? I didn't mean to say
No,
women.
you said men.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm getting old. Anyway, so
Okay.
yes, men
You
are
said
the
it right.
ones, you know, committing the violent crimes against women. So we, you know, let's just follow the statistics on that, and we should not be, you know. But that isn't the only matter. I mean, they made that the only talking point, and that was a mistake. We really should go for the whole enchilada, not all these little issues like whack-a-mole on the transgender stuff.
Agreed.
Look, it should be really simple. Unless someone needs assistance for a matter of safety, such as a young child who has their adult guardian accompanying them. I accompany my minor son into the women's restroom. I don't feel it's safe for him to go in to a public restroom with adult men. And he wouldn't feel safe with that either. He has anxiety. So he doesn't like get out of my view at all. So should he have to wear a diaper? Should I have to wear a diaper in public because I can't access a bathroom and feel safe? I mean, we are allowing men into our restrooms. We couldn't even get that passed because the woke corporations and the woke Chamber of Commerce in Texas pressured our Republican leadership in Texas. I mean, the LGBTQ should be kissing Republicans' butts in Texas because they have had their backs all the way.